Hello and welcome back. This is David from the Personal Finance Squad. Okay, now we're going to get into section 11.8, taking out a 401k loan. This differs from a withdrawal because that money is taken out and it's gone, and there's penalties that apply. With a 401k loan, there is no penalty as long as you pay the money back on time or do not default on the loan. Now, a 401k loan works like any other loan that you can think of, such as a car or a boat or a mortgage. Now the difference is that the interest that is paid is actually going back into the account where you took the money from. So this is the rare occasion that the interest you pay actually goes back to yourself. So for example here, let's look and say a $10,000 amount is borrowed from $40,000 that is actually valued into the account. Now what you need to understand here is that if you're at $40K and you borrow 10, you're taking out $10,000 worth of your investments. And then you are paying them back in installments to get this back to 40. But when you read your 401k statement, your account value is still going to be reflected at 40 at the time you take it because they're keeping the 30 here and they're keeping the 10 here. The difference is as you keep paying back in, you're going to keep putting more money back into investments, and then the cash part that you owe is going to decrease because it starts going back up to the principal balance. Okay, so let's look at some rules here. They say that $50,000 is the max that you can borrow, or 50% of the vested account balance. We talked about vesting in a prior chapter, and vesting means that's the percentage that you're allowed to take out based on a service criteria through your employer. So that means if you're 80% vested, for example, and you have a $40,000 account, you multiply that out, and that means $32,000 is what would be yours if you were to borrow to a max or even leave the company. Okay, so let's look at some scenarios that show us on how you can take money out. Now, one thing you need to understand is that when you're determining how much money that you can take out, it will say if you have taken money out in the last 12 months or have an outstanding loan, which means beyond 12 months, the highest outstanding balance from the past 12 months must be subtracted from the dollar amount that the employee would otherwise be eligible to withdraw for a loan. So let's look at this a little deeper because that's a lot to digest there. Scenario 1. The account has 50 grand in it and has a value of $25,000 that can be taken out. So that's the 50% rule because you don't have enough in there to take 50. You would have to have $100,000 in money in order to take out $50,000 for the max amount, okay? Now scenario 2 says the account has $50,000 and $20,000 being borrowed, and that leaves 30. So remember, we're talking about total value. So you're borrowing 20, there's 30 left, that means there's still 50. Remember, it's always reflected in the total, even in the money you're borrowing in your account. Now let's say a month later it's worth 52 grand, and that means another $6,000 can be borrowed. So you have to put the formula in here again, and you can see that $26,000 is the number. So they're looking at it and saying, hey, I've already taken out one loan, so now we got to subtract like we were talking about up here. So if you could take out 26 as a max, you've already taken out 20, and that leaves your $6,000 that you could take at this time in place. Scenario number 3, same thing, except the difference here is the count went down. The principal balance is down. It was at 50, but now it's at 48, and you run the math again, and now it's down to $24,000 is to what you could take out. So that would be this $4,000 here minus this 20, and that would leave you with this $4,000 figure that you could take out right here. Now here's another scenario, $50,000 account value, but this is where the vesting comes in, because up here we're saying, assuming that these are all fully vested, you only have an 80% vested value at the time, so you have to perform additional math. So now we have to take $50,000 multiplied by the 80 like we did over here in this place, and that means up to $40,000 can be considered as a value to take against. But then when you run the formula of 50% max, that leaves you with the ability to borrow 20. Okay, so now let's look a little deeper in thinking about why should I take a 401k loan and how does it affect me? When you're borrowing, the plan will have an interest rate on top of the money that we talked about, just like a normal loan. Now the difference here is that this money is coming from after-tax income. When you have a 401k plan, it's pre-tax, and that's one of the great advantages in having an investment account like a 401k, because the money you're paying in taxes is deferred. You'll be taxed later at your tax rate at the time you take it out, at the earliest of 59.5% without a penalty. We've covered this in earlier chapters, so if you want more information on this, just go back and look. So when you're paying after-tax income, paying that money back, it's like you would pay your car auto loan. It's after your money's taxed out. So now you're not getting the benefit of putting this money back in when you're paying it back. You're not getting the pre-tax benefit. So we'll cover that a little bit down farther here. We mentioned that a few times. So someone's going to say, what is a reason to take out a 401k loan? And you're going to hear many people in the financial media, if you read about this, saying it is like suicide to be taking out money against your future. But now you got to consider this. We're realistic in the squad, and we know that not everyone has their finances like everybody else. Some people are really set up with it. Some people have health issues. Some people are working their way out of bankruptcy. Some people are just learning how to budget for the first time. Eventually, if you follow the right practices, you'll get where you need to be. But realistically, people run into problems. So you have to think, when would I take this? And the one thing is to say is, am I going to pay more if I borrowed through a credit card or an interest-bearing loan as I would to take money out from a 401k loan and paying myself back interest? Now, that is really hard to figure out that information because you don't know what the future is going to be. So on the whole, you really should not try to borrow from a 401k unless you need to. So the idea here is borrow if you have a real need for it. So right here, buying a house. Let's just say you have to take on your mother-in-law in your house and you didn't know you had to do that. Maybe your house burned down and you need money to go put back into it and you're waiting on some insurance payments, or you're not getting the insurance money you wanted. Or let's say we have a funeral coming up, then you need some money to help pay for it. These are scenarios that are more realistic to borrow from it. You have to think of it this way. Do not go and get such things such as a big screen television or pay off credit card debt through a 401k loan. That's not the idea. Remember, you're always taking away from your future if you're borrowing money from something you're trying to invest in. So you need better practices, hopefully, if you're not managing your money right when you're borrowing from a 401k loan. So the other thing we could say about this is you could borrow money in a short-term scenario. So hopefully if you can keep it to that, where maybe it's 2, 3, 4, 5,000 example, and you can pay that off fast, you're not going to hurt yourself too much, but you really should not be in the practice of borrowing money from a 401k loan on the whole. Now, that gets us right into reasons why not to take it, as I've already been stating or preluding to. So again, you're going to see the same sentence here if you read this prior in a PDF, and it says, financial experts feel that taking out a 401k loan is robbing from your retirement. So here's some reasons what they're getting at. Loss of potential investment growth. So the reduction in investments may lead to proportionally less of market gains. Because remember, in our example up here, you had 40K, and if you took out 10, well, then this $10,000 in here, you're paying back in like an installment. So you've taken away $10,000 out of this 40. So that's not making any money with your investments, assuming that your investments are growing. Over time, investments pretty much grow. So now if, let's say you chunked out at $250 a month, that would take you over 3 years to pay off this $10,000, and you're just putting it in here by little, and rather than having it sitting here the whole $10,000 the whole time, potentially making money for you. Owning fewer shares because of the loan. So when you sell funds, right, the market could be lower, and then let's say when you're buying money back with this $250 a month, let's just say you bought stock on the average, or your mutual funds average $25 a share, right? Okay, now when you're putting in this $250 right here every month, you could have it where the shares are 28 and 31 and 32 and so on. That means you're buying back the investments that you were borrowed from at higher rates, which means you're getting less shares for the money that you're paying. And again, that's the thought of, hey, if I just had my money in here the whole time, I'm accumulating more money that way. We mentioned this before, payments after tax. So when you pay pre-tax 401k, right, it's deferred. But when you're paying after, then it means you're getting taxed twice. So what it means is that you're paying money back into your 401k with after-tax money, which means you've already paid tax from your take-home paycheck, and then you're putting money on top of it, like that $250 there, right? But then, being that the $250 is already in there and it grows over time, when you take it out later in life, you're going to get taxed again on that money. So it's hard to put your head around that, but initially you paid pre-tax, right? But then you borrowed, so then you have to pay after-tax to pay it back. And then when you take the money out, when you're at retirement age, you're paying tax a second time at your tax rate. So they call that double taxation. Reducing or eliminating new contributions. Now, what they're going to say here, you're going to hear people say, hey, listen, if I'm borrowing from my 401k, there's a good chance, a propensity, that I'm not contributing the normal money that I would into my account. So let's just say you put in $250 a month on average, and now you're paying $250 a month to pay it back. in our example. That means there's 500 a month. So what people say, you know, it's a correlation. There's going to be a certain amount of people who do this. They're thinking, well, these people are going to pay back this 250 here, right? But this 250 here is never going to happen, because if I have to borrow for this 250, then I don't have the money to pay the normal 250 into my account every check. Now, that doesn't mean it's true. Everybody's different. I've known people who've had 401k loans and they pay both. Remember, someone could have a car payment, and most people do, so maybe they decided to have a car payment through their 401k and they still made their normal payment through the 401k through their check. So again, you can see there's a lot of reasons here, so you really have to think about why you want to take a 401k loan. And again, we talked about earlier that on the whole, it's probably not the best thing to do if you can avoid it. This is not the route you want to go, even if you're paying yourself back interest. Now, how the loan works, this is the last piece here to this section. And it's just, again, like a mortgage or a boat or a car loan. You're paying yourself back through after-tax deductions, as we mentioned. And you're borrowing money by selling off the funds that you have. And then, again, we pay after tax, we're mentioning here, so I'm just kind of paraphrasing. So you'll have some kind of guideline here that the employer will have. And this guideline would be telling you on their website, it would tell you based on the scenarios how much you could borrow. It'll know. So as we went up here with these scenarios, you'll go in there and say, I want to have a loan. You go into that section, the loan will say, hey, I can take up to X amount. And then they're going to say, you can take how many years to pay it. And it's typically around the 4-year range is the high watermark that you can have your loan extend out for. So you're going to have the amount borrow. You're going to have the term, right, the years. Then you're going to have interest rate. You can apply right on the website if that's what you choose to do. And then as you go, you'll be fine. And you pay it like anything else. Now, there are scenarios where the employer may let you pay, or the plan through the employer may let you pay in a one lump sum. I've seen many times where they're like, listen, you can pay it off in installments, but you can also pay it off in a lump sum one time. So maybe you come up the last chunk of money or something, you want to just get it over with. But it's oftentimes you'll see rules where they say, listen, you can't pay it off in big chunks. You can't say, if I'm paying $250 a month, I'm going to decide to pay $500 this month and $700 this month. Don't necessarily let you do that. So you have to check the employer guidelines here to make sure what they allow you to do. So that's another thing you need to think about before you borrow the money. Okay, so that's going to do it for this section. So really think about a 401k loan and the ramifications of why you need to take one. At all costs, if you can avoid doing it, you should, because on the whole, money grows over time. It's by history, it's been proven. And if you're taking money out and then paying it back, you're not letting it grow like it could. You're not making that dollar cost averaging movement. You're not getting that interest or dividends from those funds that you own. So if you can find some other way to borrow money, try not to do it this way, even in light of you paying yourself interest back. But if you must do it, try to do it diligently. Don't get huge chunks of money if you can avoid it, because you're getting into bad habits that you don't want to do that. This is your future, this is your money, and you're trying to build it and protect it rather than taking from it. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up, and we appreciate you joining, and we will see you in our next section of 401k loan after termination from your employer. Thanks for joining.